Hello again. My name is Maya Kehr Yoder, and I'm coming to you from First Mennonite Church in Iowa City. So this week's Bible study continues to follow Jesus' journey to Jerusalem and to the cross. Matthew 20 features one of the many women characters in Matthew, the mother of the sons of Zebedee. As a follower of Jesus herself, we know later she's present at the crucifixion in Matthew 27, she understands Jesus' identity as one who will rule a kingdom, a king. He's the Messiah. And so she asks for privileges for her sons, who were among the first of Jesus' followers. Such favors were common among kings and queens of the ancient Near East. It was expected that the closest and most favored would receive rewards and privileges and power. They would be elevated over others. So what this mother doesn't understand yet is that the kind of king Jesus will be and the upside-down nature of his kingdom, it's going to be different. And Jesus responds to her by saying, he has not come to be a tyrant that rules over others. Instead, he tells them, whoever wishes to be greatest among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man came to be not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So if I were leading this Bible study, I might consider starting with action, perhaps a foot washing or hand washing or other act of service while reflecting on these words from Jesus could be a really powerful way to start. Because this passage in itself seems to be as much about action as attitude. So there is an attitude that Jesus is correcting. Following him will not lead to the kind of prosperity and honor like those who follow the kings of Roman empires or other empires. We could even say empires of today. Instead, following Jesus could mean drinking a bitter cup. And it's so bitter that even Jesus prayed for it to pass him by. So here's an interesting question you could bring up. What does this promise of suffering have to say to the prosperity gospel, which is one that we know has circulated around the U.S., this gospel that says health and wealth come to those who follow Jesus. What would Jesus' promise of a bitter cup? How would that speak into that, this prosperity gospel that has become commonplace? So consider unpacking that in your group. How might Jesus be providing a counter narrative here? How are we maybe similar to the mother of the sons of Zebedee in our expectations? How would Christianity be different if followers expected suffering or a bitter cup instead of a reward? Interesting things to think about. So in addition to action, in addition to attitude, Jesus is also naming action that's needed. It's not just an attitude adjustment. There's a new way of being. Serving others is the new way that he is asking his disciples to follow him in. And this serving one another, it requires other people, obviously, community. And it's also a sign that we belong to one another. There's no way around it. Jesus is saying we belong to one another. And I'd like to share a quote that maybe you could share with your group from Amanda Gorman. She writes, "Since the world is round, there is no way to walk away from each other, for even then we are coming back together." So a potential complicating question you could offer is, who do you find it most difficult to serve? And how might we walk back toward each other together? Finally, I think it's worth mentioning something further complicating, and that is the presence of slavery throughout the New Testament and in this passage. And it should make us uncomfortable that slavery was a common practice. We know slaves were without power and faced harsh conditions. And many times as translators, we try to make ourselves a little bit more comfortable by translating slave as servant, when the more accurate translation is indeed slave. And Jesus does mention becoming a slave here. So what do we do with that? We like to talk about servant leadership, but we don't often wrestle with the use of slavery. Slave leadership? Become like a slave? What's problematic in this? What would it look like for us to really wrestle with this part of Scripture? So in all that wrestling and all that service, I hope that God will bless you as you wrestle.